When I was younger and nearing my middle school years, I had a cousin who lived in Hollywood, California, who was in the acting world at that time, and she was getting married to someone else who was in that world. So my whole family went from rural Ohio to Hollywood, California to be a part of this wedding. My brother and I were a part of the actual wedding, ceremony, and so we had to get all dressed up and all the stuff for that, and we had to do the rehearsal dinner like you normally do. But of course, it wasn't just any normal rehearsal dinner or even just a normal rehearsal for a wedding. And I remember part of the whole wedding process, it might have been the day of the wedding, we're all getting to the place where the wedding was, I think it was a church, and I think at least one of us, rode in a limo, if not all of us. It was a done-up kind of a thing. And as the car door opens, all these people start going, and they're like, oh, it's just that guy. It was my dad. This, no name, nobody there knew who he was, person from rural Ohio. And as comical as that situation is, we kind of all understand the assumption that was going on there. When a limo pulls up for such an occasion, it communicates something. It suggests status. It suggests importance. It suggests strength of some kind, at least the way our world views it. And every culture has symbols that communicate strength. In the ancient world, one of those symbols was the horn of an animal. This is a dog chew thing. I think it's actually from an animal, but it's a dog chew thing. If afterward you have a dog that would enjoy utilizing this, find me and I'll gladly give it to you. But for right now, I'm using it. But yeah, in the ancient world, one of these was the symbol of strength. A horn was a symbol of strength. And part of the reason that a horn becomes such a powerful symbol is because of what a horn represents in the animal kingdom. A horn communicates the strength of an animal. It says this creature isn't powerless. It has power behind it, and it can do some damage. It can charge. It can defend itself. It has the ability to act and to do something. The horn is a visible reminder that strength is present in that moment. Like the photographers who assumed that a limo meant a person of strength and importance was inside of it, we too can assume that certain things indicate strength or vitality, or the ability to get things done. Someone's status, their influence, or the platform that they have can become a horn in our day and age. Wealth can become a horn. It's a form of strength that we assume can solve problems if you have it and can wield it. Political power and military action can become a horn. Something we assume is where real change ultimately takes place. Security, protection, laws, and policies can become a horn. Things we're tempted to believe will save us from whatever is threatening us. But it's not just the world around us that has horns that we look to. We each have our own versions of this. Achievement can become a horn in your life, believing that if you can accomplish enough or succeed enough or prove yourself enough that you won't be overlooked then. Or maybe it's approval that's your horn. Believing that if people just recognized you and respected you and affirmed you, then you'd finally have the strength and significance that you're looking for. Or maybe it's control. Believing that if you could just manage enough or plan enough and protect yourself enough that you'd finally be rescued from whatever situation you're in. There are many other horns that we're tempted to chase in life. Things we believe that if we had them, if they were raised up in our life, our situations would finally be different. We wouldn't be ignored, we wouldn't be forgotten, and we'd have what we need. Because if we're honest, we're all tempted to believe strength is found where the world expects it to be found. We're tempted to expect the world's strength to be the strength that we need in our life. But in 1 Samuel 1 and chapter 2, Hannah's song invites us to consider something very different. What if we've been looking for strength in the wrong place? Hannah's story begins with what seemed impossible. If you look back to the beginning of chapter 1, which we looked at last week, Hannah was barren. She longed for a son, and she was unable to have one. Humanly speaking, there was no solution for her situation. But then the Lord intervened. The Lord's strength entered her weakness. Samuel wasn't simply an answered prayer. He was evidence that God's strength had shown up in Hannah's life. Yet the surprising part of the story isn't only that Hannah received a son named Samuel, it's that she gives him back. She doesn't keep this long-awaited son that she longed for. Hannah had vowed that if God would give her a son, she would give him back to the Lord. And after Samuel was born, she kept that promise. Imagine how difficult that must have been. Think about something you have deeply longed for, and then you actually get it. Would you be so willing to just be like, I'm done, like here, I'm handing it back? The very gift that could have become her security, her significance, and her future, she now places back into God's hands. Because Hannah had discovered something greater than just receiving a son. She discovered that the Lord himself was her strength. The Lord is her horn. That's why she sings. Her song isn't mainly about Samuel. It's about the God who gives life where there was none, who raises up the lowly just like she was, who overturns the world's assumptions about what's strong. And Hannah's story becomes Israel's story. Her song becomes Israel's song. Just as God brought life to a barren woman, we also see throughout Israel's life that God brought life to a people who had no future apart from him. They were just a singular family clan that would have just wandered around like everybody else had God not intervened in their life and stepped into their story. Israel existed because God acted in their life. Israel survived because God acted. Israel's hope rested not on its own strength, although they often thought it did, and time again they were shown that it didn't, but it rested in the Lord's strength. And Hannah's song even looks ahead to the king whom God would one day raise up. Hannah recognizes God's strength in the song because she saw what God had done in her life. And then she made God's strength known beyond her own situation. She shared it with others by telling what God had done. That's what we see in the song that she sings, in this prayer that she prays. When Hannah eventually brings Samuel to the tabernacle to give him back to God and dedicate him to the Lord, she tells Eli, whom she initially had this conversation about even praying for this child to begin with, she tells Eli, "Pardon me, my Lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you, praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him." What we see here is Hannah doesn't keep God's work to herself. She tells Eli what God has done in her life. She bears witness. She bears testimony. She names the Lord as the one who made possible the impossible. Hannah's strength wasn't found in finally having a son. Her strength was found in the God who gave life where there was none. That's why she could give Samuel back, and that's why she could sing, because she had something greater than the thing that she longed for. As we reflect on this passage today, we too are invited to do the same. We're invited to recognize God's strength, to look for it in the unexpected ways that God works, because it doesn't often show up the way the world would expect strength to show up. It shows up the way God shows up in strength. And that's how we see in the life of Hannah. And we're invited to make God's strength known just like Hannah did by telling others what he's done. Our testimony isn't ultimately about us. It's about the God whose strength has met us in our weakness. When we tell others what God has done, we're inviting them to trust the same Lord who is Hannah's strength, who is Israel's strength, and through Jesus Christ can become our strength today. We're invited to believe that God's strength is made known through what he's done and sharing that good news with others. As we all know, living in this part of the world, soon Bill's training camp will begin. And then will come the preseason games, which barely anybody pays attention to, but they're still coming. And the first preseason game each year is usually the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. I don't know if you know this history, but in 1974, the Bills introduced the logo that we recognize today as their logo during the Hall of Fame game of that year. They changed their logo from the standing buffalo that we've seen as the retro logo often during the season to the charging buffalo. The one that has the streak that goes with it, the one we all think of, right? The designer added a streak to the logo to communicate movement, action, speed, and intensity. I mean, it is very different than just a buffalo standing there, right? Like, that's just very static and not doing anything. But another detail that was added to that new logo was the buffalo's horns. As mentioned earlier, horns communicate strength. And I think we see that in the newer logo. Horns tell you this animal has the power to charge, to defend itself, and to take action. And that's what's hopefully evoked in that logo, right? In football, strength can take many forms. It can be a dominant defense. It can be explosive playmakers. It can be brilliant coaching. But sometimes it comes from unexpected places, like a no-named quarterback from California that played at Wyoming. Like the charging buffalo, the horn points us to strength. So it is also in 1 Samuel. The Lord's actions reveal his strength in Hannah's life. And more broadly, it shows God's strength in Israel's life and their relationship with God. God brings life where there was none for both Hannah and Israel. He turns Hannah's life upside down in a good way, and he turns Israel's life upside down in a good way. They would never be what they were apart from him in their life. And as Hannah's song unfolds in 1 Samuel chapter 2, God's strength appears in unexpected ways. Let's just look through her song or her prayer here for a moment. In verse 1, she says, "The lowly rejoice over their enemies." The lowly are not usually who make the headlines of conquering an enemy. But yet it says, the lowly are the ones who rejoice over their enemies. Or in verses 3 through 4, "The proud are weighed and brought low." We often think the proud are never going to be brought to their knees. They're always going to just be over us. But yet Hannah's saying, no, they do. God weighs their actions and brings justice. In verse 5, we see that the hungry are filled while the full become hungry. That things are turned upside down, unexpected. In verse 8, we see the poor and needy are raised up and seated with princes. Again, not what we would expect. The wicked are silenced, we see in verse 9. And in verse 10, human strength does not prevail. It's not human strength that makes things happen. And when those who oppose the Lord, they're broken by how the Lord responds to that situation. What we see in all of these is that every one of these is a reversal. It reveals the same truth. God's strength is made known by how he acts. And how he acts is to work in unexpected ways for unexpected, in ways we wouldn't expect him to. And he delights to act for those who have no strength of their own. God is the horn. He is the strength that the lowly look to. He makes himself known by displaying this kind of strength again and again and again and again for people the world would least expect to. That's why Hannah begins her song by rejoicing in the Lord, her horn. We see that in chapter 2, verse 1. Because he alone is the Lord. He is the one who has authority over all things. There is no strength like his. God's strength is made known through what he's done. And we know God's strength by how he steps into history, how he steps into our stories. When people are suffering, when we feel trapped, when we feel powerless to change things, we tend to look for someone or something to save us. Think back to COVID for a moment. During COVID, people were looking for medical solutions on one hand, and others were looking for deliverance from mandates on the other. But both were looking for the same thing. Somebody do something about this thing that I don't think is right. And during the blizzard of 2022, people looked for rescuers to free them from snowdrifts or utility workers to restore their power. And on any day that ends in Y, people look to political leaders to restore the country or address threats, to fix corruption, or make a better future possible. The reality is every culture has stories like this. Stories where a person steps in to deliver what individuals cannot accomplish on their own. The Bible has a word for this kind of person. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word is Messiah. In the New Testament, the Greek word is Christ. Both words mean the same thing. They mean an anointed person, someone called out to do something unique that no one else can do. And while this word applies to Jesus in a unique way, while it applies to the Son of God in a unique way, because he is the one who delivers humanity back into life-giving relationship with the Creator of all things, the idea of an anointed person also appears all throughout the story of God's people. As Israel's story unfolds, God constantly raises up anointed leaders to deliver his people from specific threats. Just read through the book of Judges and you see the people fall away from God. They get brought into judgment by another people, and then God raises up someone to deliver them. And that cycle returns over and over and over and over because God raises up anointed people to deliver his people. So when Hannah's song says that the Lord will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed, Hannah is looking ahead to the way God will continue to show his strength, just like he's already done throughout Israel's story, through the king that he raises up. Eventually that will be King David in a more immediate sense for Hannah's culture, the great king who makes Israel a dominant force in that era. But Hannah's song ultimately points us beyond any earthly Messiah, any earthly Christ, any earthly anointed deliverer. Beyond David, beyond any president, beyond any scientist or any rescue worker, no human being is strong enough to deliver us from our greatest threat. There is only one who can. The Lord is the true horn of strength. He is the one who brought life to Hannah's barren body. He is the one who gave strength to a seemingly insignificant nation like Israel. And he is the one who will ultimately bring victory over sin and death through Jesus. And that's the opportunity we have to step into today, because that's a threat we all face. Hannah recognized that the Lord is the strongest horn that there is. No one compares. Every other source of strength is dependent on him. The Lord alone can truly deliver. And Jesus gives us the clearest picture of this truth. He shows us how God's strength is not in the ways the world expects. The world doesn't expect a little baby boy to be the person who will change the world and overcome sin and death. But that's how God acts. God will show up, his strength will show up to overcome the greatest threat to life itself through the cross and through resurrection. But yet again, that's how God's strength shows up. God's strength is made known through what he's done. As you reflect on God's word today, where has the Lord's strength unexpectedly showed up in your life? I want to invite you to honestly think about that. Where has God's strength showed up in your life? How has the Lord, your horn, reversed what didn't seem reversible? How has he lifted you up from an oppressor? Be it a person, a circumstance, a disease, or a loss. How has the Lord overcome what seemed too big or too powerful or too impossible to overcome? What kind of strength are we looking for? Is it the strength of the Lord, or is it the strength the world looks for? Is it the strength of the Lord revealed most fully in his anointed one, Jesus, who is the Christ, who is the Messiah, who is the Savior that our lives all need? Are you expecting God to display his strength in the way of Jesus? Or are you looking for him to show up in the ways the world expects? The same God whose strength showed up in Hannah's life is the same God who still shows up in our lives today. Do you recognize his strength at work in your life? Do you recognize the surprising ways he often works? And when you do you tell others? We might recognize it, but do we then make that known to others? Do you share the joy of what God has done, the way Hannah shared with Eli, the way Hannah does to the nation of Israel through this song and prayer that we have in 1 Samuel? Our witness is one of the ways God makes his strength known in our world. Our testimony points people to the God who is our horn, to the God revealed in Jesus Christ, to the one and only Lord, who alone has the authority and strength to save us. When we keep what God has done to ourselves, we miss the opportunity to help others see his strength. But when we share what God has done, we help others to trust the Lord more deeply. We can encourage each other to keep believing that God will show up again and again, even when it's hard for each of us to see it. And we invite those who don't yet know him to discover that they too can trust the Jesus who shows up and shows God's strength in unexpected ways. That God still shows up today in their life. If that's you, if you're just beginning to lean into who Jesus is and who he reveals himself to be, please find me or another trusted follower of Jesus, and we'd be glad to walk with you toward believing in that more fully. To discover the strength of God at work in your life and to see how you can lean more into walking with him. If you're ready to take that next step, please find me or another trusted follower of Jesus, and we'd be glad to help you express your faith in baptism and immerse your life in Jesus and begin following him with your whole life. God's strength is made known when we share what he's done. God's strength is made known through what he's done. And before we leave this passage, I'd like to invite you to consider how God's strength has already been made known by what he's done in your life. A couple ways that I've noticed God's strength show up are these. One of the ways I've seen the Lord as my horn at work over the past month has been in the lives of my two boys. Like Hannah, I've prayed for my kids day after day that they would submit and surrender their lives to Jesus, that they would trust him as their Lord. And much sooner than I probably would have expected it to happen, my two boys began asking about being baptized and becoming Christians and starting to follow Jesus. As a dad, that's one of the ways I've seen God's strength made known in unexpected ways in my life. Not because of what I've done. I mean, I've tried to help in that process, but I can't make them make that kind of decision. But it's because of God's presence and activity in their lives, his strength showing up, that has happened. Another thing that has happened is last week I mentioned that we were looking for a home for missionaries who are going to be visiting us here in the fall. And at the time, that seemed like I'm not sure where that help's going to come from, where that housing will come from. But yet, God's strength has showed up and provided, so we have a place for them to stay. So that's something we can celebrate. But let me ask you, how has God's strength been made known in your life? How has the Lord shown up in an unexpected way? If you would, just please share. How has God shown up in your life? How has his strength showed up in your life? Be it this week, maybe the last month, maybe over the last year, but what are some ways God has showed up in your life? I'd be glad for you to share if you'd be willing to.
Giving me good and godly relationships.
Good and godly relationships. Those aren't things you just make happen on your own all the time.
Being able to still play the piano.
Yes, being able to still play the piano at the age Diana's still at. Yes, like, again, she doesn't expect to be able to do that, but by God's strength, she's still able to do that. Finding a job that you like. That's not always easy, right? But yet, God's presence and activity, his strength showing up, has made that happen.
I'm going to sit here.
What was that?
I'm going to sit here after everything.
Yeah, that you're here after that's all that's happened, yes. Yes, God's strength shows up time and time and time again. I think each of us probably have a story we could think of and share in some way or another. And my encouragement for you is before you leave today, find someone and tell them at least one way that God's strength has showed up in your life. Your story may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today, to encourage them to believe that God will still show up, or maybe to believe for the first time or to lean into Jesus. Because God's strength is made known when we share what He's done. God's strength is made known through what He's done. Would you join me in prayer as we close? Father God, thank you for showing up, for being strong in ways that we don't expect you to show up, but they're the ways that we need and ways that we can't make happen on our own. Thank you that you did that in Hannah's life. Thank you that you did that in Israel's life. Thank you that you did that in your son's life, Jesus, by raising him from the dead after giving his life on the cross. Thank you that you still show up in the life of your church today, that you still show up in our lives. Father, help us to be bold and confident to share how you show up in our lives. That we are one way that your strength is made known in this world by just our simple testimony. Father, lead us and guide us to believe that you are our strength and that we have something worth sharing with others by how you've acted in our life. It's by the power of your Spirit, through your Son Jesus, that we pray this. Amen.